Would you pray with me? Lord, now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. In Jesus' name, amen. In the year 1651, Thomas Hobbes famously said in his treatise Leviathan that human life was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Which, if it's the first four, why you want it to be long, I don't know. But that's what he said. Recently, in a TED Talk, psychologist Steven Pinker said that until very recently in human history, life expectancy for all of us, the average life expectancy, was about 30 years. Life has been tough. It has always been tough. One of the problems is that it's a tough life already, and we tend to kill each other in order to get the stuff to deal with the tough life we already have. So, throughout human history, human beings have solved this in a very few particular ways, and today we're going to talk about those. We're going to posit that each of these candles represents a human life, for now. That'll change. Stay with me. So, these are human lives. These represent individual human lives. And the problem for human life early on in humanity is we can all kill each other. And there's not enough resources in our little place for everybody who comes in. There might be others who come in. We don't want them using our river. We don't want them dropping dead bodies upstream from us. So we have to keep them away. So here's what we do. We start with tribes. And tribes tend to be centered around a strong figure, usually a male, usually a warrior, but sometimes a philosopher, sometimes a wise person, very, very rarely a female. And we form tribes. And we create something early on, long before we can describe it or have really any consciousness of it. We create something called a social contract, right? We make a deal. And the social contract of the tribe is this. The tribe becomes our identity. We have this central figure around which this is our leader, we kind of do what he says, but everybody in the tribe has a role, and every life in the tribe is valued. We each have something we're supposed to do. We have warriors, we have hunters, we have gatherers, we have women who take care of the children, we have older women who do their job, older men who do their job. Everybody has a job, and we value every life in our tribe. We call ourselves the people, and that's who we are. And these lives are valued. The math is this: all of these lives are valued, and the rest of them don't matter at all. If you're not in my tribe, I don't care about you at all. You get in my way, the way of my tribe, we're going to kill you, right? That's what we do. But this tribe is doing the same thing over here, and this tribe is doing the same thing over here, and this tribe is doing the same thing over here. We each have our tribes, and it keeps us alive, right? Until we fight, it keeps us alive. So tribes are something that is deeply entrenched in human history, deeply entrenched in our psyche, and tribes are everywhere, and they still survive to this day. There are still communities that survive as tribes. What is this but a tribe? And also, think about the people who love your football team. Wahoos. Any Wahoos in the room? Right? There's a tribe. And that tribe hates the tribe that calls themselves... See, I didn't even have to say it. Right? Tribes, very deeply entrenched in who we are as human beings. So tribes worked for a long time. They were very successful for much of human history. But then what started to happen was tribes, the population grew, frankly, and tribes all gathered around a certain advantageous area. Say, for example, the mouth of the Nile River. Oh, that's a great spot, right? It's fertile. there's lots of land, there's lots of water, lots of space for everybody to live. So now our tribes are living together. We're dealing with each other together. Well, we've never liked each other. We've always hated you, right? So how are we going to do this? Well, the way we did it was we said, we're going to change tribes. Actually, let me light this from you. We're going to change from tribes, and we're going to create an empire. And the empire works great. It is centered around this central figure. And what we do with this central figure is we associate this central figure with deities, right? This is a god. And this person has a direct line to power, magical powers, powers of life and death, sun and rain and wind, all this person has control over them. And we all gather around this very strong person. And here's the social contract, the math of the social contract here. This guy matters an awful lot. This guy matters a lot. Those who are close to this guy, they matter a lot. These guys over here, The deal is that this guy is supposed to offer protection for these, and he does, mostly, until they get in his way, until they bring him a peanut butter sandwich that he didn't want, until they say that he did something wrong, until they somehow oppose something that he wants. But most people get along pretty good in the empire, and the empires are very, very successful. A really interesting website that I love to go to and that I recommend highly is called Maps of War. And what it shows is how these empires swept in and out over the face of the earth. Egypt, and then Babylon, and then Persia, and then the Sassanids, and then the Huns, oh my gosh, the Mongols, and then Mongols just take over everything, and then the Romans, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, and then the colonies and the European empires that come down into Africa and over into the Middle East and come over to North America. Oh my gosh, empires are amazing, and they work for a long, long time. Now, what is the problem if you're a tribe? Well, you've got a couple of choices if you're a tribe. One choice is you can join the empire, and they'll let you join. They might make you slaves. You might be slaves, but you can join the empire, and you can have the protection of the empire. If you fight them, if you are a tribe and you say, I don't want to be part of your empire, you're done. You're dead. We're not going to have that. We're not going to have you out here, tribe, over against our empire. Now, during the time of empires, there's a little flirtation with something called a republic. Little tiny moment where they say, oh, you know what, let's take our smart guys and we'll let them be representative of us, right? We'll put them out front and we'll let them be representative, and they'll take care of the rest of us, which lasts for about 5 seconds until somebody says, no, but I want to be emperor. Bam, back to empire. But it does kind of spark the idea that possibly we could rule ourselves. So guess what kills the empire? Some of you know this. What kills the empire? Tribes. Because what tribes learn is guerrilla warfare. They don't ever take on the empire all at once. They go, just killed that guy. Tribes come in, Vandals, Vikings, others, Huns. They come in and they tear down the Roman Empire. It happens elsewhere in the world. And although the age of empires continues to last, it dwindles in its influence, and you get what is known as we'll leave him all lit. The Dark Ages. You get a period where there's a bit of chaos. There is no central leadership. Things fall apart. And out of that, you get something called feudalism, which is a little dance between democracy and empire, where the king now has to follow some laws. There are laws, and even the king has to obey them. And if we don't like what the king is doing, we just chop his head off. That's our vote. We vote against you by taking off your head. So we get this period of the Middle Ages of feudalism. And out of feudalism, amazingly, comes something called the Enlightenment. It comes out of people needing to read sacred documents. And as they read sacred documents, they become more literate. The whole culture becomes more literate, gradually, slowly. It's a long process. I mean, it's 1671 when Thomas Hobbes is talking about nasty, brutish, and short. But slowly, 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 ideas begin to form. People have rights. Now, we're still talking about people with property. We're not talking about women. We're not talking about people who aren't the majority culture. But we are beginning to think that more than just a few people have rights. And then we get to the 18th century and the experiment with democracy. And what democracy says, the social contract of democracy is this. You have these people who represent you, and they're supposed to do things that are in your best interest. There's no king. There's just representatives. And each of the representatives represents a bunch of people. And they're supposed to keep their best interests in mind. And it's still an experiment. We're still kind of waiting to find out if it works. But it's the current experiment here. The other experiment that happens is called communism. And the idea of communism is there's this central party, and the party is always working in the best interests of everybody. So I cede my individual rights, but I do so because it's in the best interests of everybody. Both communism and democracy are trying to put everybody on an even ground. Nobody up here. It doesn't work. It fails. But its ideal is extraordinary, to say all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is progress. This is improvement. We've moved forward as a people. So, what is the point of this history lesson? What does this have to do with us as Christian people? Well, here's the point. What this has to do with us as Christian people is nothing at all. Now, of course, that's not true. We're going to vote. We live in the world. Some of us are going to run for office. We're going to participate in our government. We're going to be one of those people who say how our government is run. That's going to happen, and that's okay. But the point is that ultimately, Christian people are not called to put our faith in this. This is going to happen. It's going to be good sometimes, it's going to be bad sometimes. I watched the news this week and I thought they're going to think that I waited until something bad happened to talk about government, but I didn't. I already planned this, it was already in the works before things happened in our government this week. But ultimately speaking, this is not what we're about. One of the things that I think is really interesting about Jesus, when you watch the life of Jesus, he has an opportunity to start a rebellion. That's what Judas wanted. That's why Judas poked at him. That's why he got him arrested, because he thought, if I get him arrested, he will have to rebel. He will have to start the rebellion against Rome, and we'll all rise up and we'll overthrow Rome, and Jesus will be the king, and that'll be great. That's what Judas wanted. But Jesus, he's not about that. It's incidental to him. When he's given a coin from Rome and asked what he should do with it, he said, well, whose face is on it? It's not mine. It's not God's. Looks like Caesar to me. Give it back to him. That belongs to him. The Romans were incidental to him. Oppression was incidental. The life they were living was incidental. They had a higher priority, a higher spark from which they drew their flame, a higher list of laws by which they lived their lives, by which he lived his life. So all of this is not to say that the government doesn't matter. In fact, one of the interesting things that Steven Pinker says, this is a psychologist, and he's studying the data from human history. And one of the things he says is we're better now. Life is better now. Used to be life expectancy, 30 years. Now, life expectancy worldwide is 71 years, more than double. We live in the least violent time in human history. Despite what you see on the news, the least violent time in human history. We have more money, we have more comforts, we have less worry about wars. There are fewer wars than there used to be. There are even fewer wars than there were 20, 30 years ago. Life is better. And we are part of that. And one of the things he points out is that life doesn't get better accidentally. We're not separate from it. He says, left to its own device, the universe is indifferent to us, and things get worse and not better. Human life gets better by human interactions and by human effort. People tried to figure out. Tribes, they're not working. Let's try empires. Empires, they're not working. Let's try feudalism. Feudalism, not great. Let's try democracy. And right now, that's the experiment we're running, is to see how democracy works. It's got its ups and downs, but it's better. It's better. The numbers are higher, right? It's not just the one guy who matters. It's all these people, so it's better. So human effort matters. It matters. But the spark, where does the spark come from? I was reminded this week of the story of Desmond Doss, your local hero. And most of you know this story, but just in case you don't, Desmond Doss was a young man, 1942. He is working in the shipyards in Newport News. He has an easy deferment. He does not have to go to war, but he enlists. He goes into the infantry. He's been raised a Seventh-day Adventist. His mother taught him vegetarianism and respecting the Sabbath and nonviolence. And when he gets to the Pacific Theater, where he has been put with the rest of the infantry, he refuses to carry a weapon into battle. And he is vilified for it, called a coward, thrown aside, beaten up. But he still won't do it, so he's made a medic. And on a night in May, when they are caught on a ridge, he's the medic, and there are men wounded all around him. They're under heavy fire, and he stays on that ridge, and one by one, under fire, he goes and he rescues this man and lowers him down the ridge, and then goes back and rescues this man and lowers him down the ridge 75 times. 75 times. Now, this was in the movie Hacksaw Ridge, which was nominated for Academy Awards. But what it doesn't tell you is that that's not the end of the story. story. He stayed there. He went back to that same ridge and rescued more men. He was wounded by shrapnel, but he literally jumped off of the stretcher because he knew that his leg wounds were not the most serious wounds, and he sent the other medics back for the more wounded men. He rescued more than 20 more people while he was there in Guam. And when he finally came home, he came home with shrapnel in his leg and a wound to his arm so bad that it caused him to be disabled for the rest of his life. Why did he do that? Let me submit this to you. It's not that he didn't love his government or his country. He did. He signed up to be part of the army when he didn't have to. So he loved his country. But that is not what threw him into battle without a weapon over and over and over and over again to save other people's lives. I would submit to you that that was this spark. That was the spark of his faith, the spark of his teachings, his mother beating into his head over and over again, "Thou shalt not kill." God is love. Sacredness of human life. And he gives up everything he has, including potentially his life, for that spark, for that belief. Our human instinct is for survival. That's what we try to do. We have been trying to do it throughout human history just to stay alive. But I would put this on the table. All of the efforts of human history to move forward have not come from inside the government. They come from the rebels. They come from a spark elsewhere. Governments can only care about continuing themselves. They protect the status quo. And if the status quo is good, it's good for the rest of us. But when it isn't, they will not change on their own. Governments protect themselves. It has to come from outside. Makes me think of Luke Skywalker. Makes me think of those kids in Stranger Things. It makes me think of one of my favorite moments in movie history. The movie's called Serenity, and this guy has found out that his government has destroyed all these people, and he's got the video recording to prove it. And what he says to his ragged band before they go out to be rebellious, he says, "I aim to misbehave." That's the spark that brings us forward, and it comes from outside of this. It comes from outside of the social contract. It may be that we are asked to behave with our government, and I think we are. I think we're expected to honor the social contract that we've made with our government. You offer us protection. You build us roads. You give us public schools. You help us with our need for medicine and our need for care for the elderly. You help us with our infrastructure. You build bridges. That's the deal. We signed up for it. Okay, you get my allegiance, you get my obedience, but only up to a point, because I serve a higher king. And that voice, if it's in conflict with you, it wins every time. So I can behave and I can do as I'm told until I have to listen to this voice that says, don't carry a weapon. You're not supposed to kill people. Don't carry a weapon. Even if they tell you to, don't do that. Save lives instead. I might listen to this voice that says, you know what, things are going badly. There's not any justice. Time to stand up. Time to argue. Time to fight. Misbehave. Let this government do its thing. You have your own calling. We're talking in Galatians about maturity. That's what freedom is about. It's about being able to decide based on my core, my beliefs. I'll tell you this last thing very briefly. One of the things I loved about teaching is veteran teachers. And veteran teachers will tell you that every time there's a new superintendent, they come in with a new program. They love their new program. And their new program is going to save everything. When you see the new program, watch the veteran teachers, because they sit in the meeting about the new program and they take notes. They're probably not about the program. They're probably making lesson plans. And then they go into their classroom and they close their door and they do what they know is right. They teach the way they know is right. And they might use this little piece of the program. They definitely are going to jump through whatever hoops they have to jump through. But ultimately, their core is inside themselves. Their maturity is inside themselves. Their knowledge is inside themselves. That's our calling. That's who we are. There's all kinds of new systems that are going to come around, all kinds of governments out there, good, bad, and indifferent. Ultimately, that's not who we are. Ultimately, we answer to a higher call. So the challenge for us today is to light our candle and to take it out in the world, to light it from this candle, from this spark, and to take it into the world, and to believe that we are the children of God, given tasks that we are called to do. Amen.